Hi, I'm Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. Welcome to this video, which is the first in a series that we're going to do on the Semi-Slav. In this video, the main game Stoofvlees is white and AllieStein is black. And we'll be looking for some ideas for black. In the Semi-Slav, AllieStein is the only neural net that chooses to play the Semi-Slav. We will also note that AlphaZero in its analysis had come up with the same position as features in this game right as far as move 28, completely independently. This game comes from the TCEC Top-of-the-Top tournament, and in our series of videos we're going to be looking at ideas for both white and black in the Semi-Slav. So let's have a look at the game.
Yeah, let's have a look. So this is the mess that gets created after 8 moves. Let's have a look how that all starts. So actually, one knight f3, pardon me, was the only move specified by the minimalist opening book used for the top-of-the-top competition, and the engines are now on their own. And well, all the NNs start like this, normally as black, but normally we either see bishop e7, that was one of AlphaZero's main moves actually, or bishop b4, the Ragozin, which was probably AlphaZero's most important choice. And well, the other NNs tend to do this too. But AllieStein's been going for the Semi-Slav, which, well, has a lot of potential to get very, very sharp, so that's always nice to see.
And AllieStein quite likes playing sharp sometimes.
AllieStein is very sharp and very strong at the moment. So no, it's good to if it chooses a line, then it's that's probably a good indication that it's a good one to follow. So in a subsequent video, we'll have a look at the Moran with e3, because AllieStein also had some games in that. But this time we're going to start with the best, the sharpest, bishop g5. Now, bishop g5 traditionally led into the Botvinnik system, e4, b5, reams and reams of analysis, loads and loads of computer games. Isn't so popular anymore. It's a big memory exercise, certainly for humans. The most popular line for black nowadays is to play h6, which is known as the Moscow variation. And well, this sets white a certain choice in actual fact. White can either play bishop takes f6, giving up the bishop pair but gaining some time and not losing a pawn, or the very sharp anti-Moscow gambit, which is bishop h4. And
there's still quite a lot of theory on this.
Quite a lot of theory on this still as well. No, exactly. So bishop f6. We'll just have a quick look to see that, because actually in the gauntlet, they called it, against Stockfish NNUE. So that's where all the top 4 machines took on the neural netified Stockfish. Stockfish NNUE took on f6. Played this f6 line e3. Well, AllieStein played something quite interesting, knight d7, bishop d3 from Stockfish NNUE. Worth pointing out that, well, AlphaZero almost always played the anti-Moscow gambit, so bishop h4. But when it did play this line, just a couple of times, it always played the bishop to e2, which is unusual and also interesting. The idea was that if black eventually takes on c4, AlphaZero wanted to actually play a move like knight d2 and take with a knight on c4, and then maybe play e4 to e5 and get another knight into e4 and into d6. Quite unusual and also quite interesting. Stockfish NNUE actually played bishop d3, and the funny thing is that we actually transposed to a line which was actually known already in 1995 and more or less neutralized. So it's quite funny here that, yeah, somehow that's probably a triumph for human understanding that that this was already known and neutralized already quite a long time ago.
When did your book in the Semi-Slav come out, Matthew?
1990,
Before that, right?
98, no, 98 I think, 98, so...
featured in your book?
I don't know. I really don't know, actually. It's a long time ago. I'm not sure I've even got a copy, actually, so it's hard to check.
I've got a copy. I'll look it up.
You can look it up. Oh, my goodness. It's so these are quite interesting positions, actually. I mean, White's got given up the bishop pair, but it's got quite a bit of central space and yeah, and a potential outpost on d6. The only point is the dark squares are quite fragile, and Black's got a dark square bishop, White hasn't. So you know you're never quite sure what which factor, you know, the two bishops, the undermining of the dark squares, or the fact that White's got space is going to work out. I mean, here AllieStein played very sharply. Bishop b7, knight e4, and then this move c5. All, as I said, previously known. And after knight takes c5, the idea is to play queen c7, and you are a pawn down, but actually it's really hard for White to hold this pawn on e5. So what you actually get is the game Stockfish and NUE against AllieStein, when takes b4 rather, queen e2, takes, and bishop takes e5. Rook e2, bishop d4, c6, rook d6, and well, White's got a nice passé pawn, but Black's very solid on the dark squares, and this just ended up as a draw. I mean, in human games as well, White hasn't managed to make very much of this at all. So that was all pretty solid from AllieStein, and in general, I mean, I do feel that these lines are pretty good for Black. Black's also got the choice. Sometimes Black can play the bishop to d6 and then back to c7, but playing this move with g6 and bishop g7 always looks pretty good to me. So that isn't really scoring that brilliantly for White at the moment. So White has really concentrated on bishop h4. And this is a real pawn sacrifice. You take on c4, e4, g5 to stop White from playing e5. Bishop g3 and b5. So yeah, what is exactly this position? Well, I mean, Black's got a pawn, and it's not a bad pawn either. This pawn on c4, you know, together with the pawn on b5, pawn on c6, makes quite a nice queenside pawn mass. And of course, the pawn on c4 stops the bishop from developing. You know, it stops the bishop from going to d3, for example. So it has quite a cramping influence on the White position, and Black also has the possibility of playing b4, you know, and chasing the knight away from c3, and then the pawn on e4 falls as well. Black's big problem is that, well, slight disadvantage in development, and the position is full of holes. So because you've played b5 and g5, well, any place where you put your king is going to be open, and in particular, yeah, you know, kingside is probably slightly more natural place for Black than the queen side. But well, with a pawn on g5, obviously that is quite weakening. And White does have a, you know, a double pawn center. And of course, you know, the fact that all these pawns have advanced like this gives White plenty of opportunities to undermine it. So plenty of ways to get out the Black position with a4, with b3 on the queen side, or with h4.
So we're bound to get a sharp game.
Oh, absolutely! It's
attacking.
Always chaos in these lines. Now there's loads of different ideas here. Bishop e2 is the move that Stoofvlees played against AllieStein. Actually, a lot of these variations can transpose into each other. What I want to show you here actually is I thought it would probably be quite useful just to see, you know, how does it go well for White? You know, how can White handle these positions in a good way? And for that, we're going to reach back to AlphaZero games against Stockfish, because AlphaZero always played the anti-Moscow Gambit and played some absolutely stunning games. We'll have another one in another video to show you as well. And AlphaZero came up with a very unusual unusual way of playing. So it played h4, attacking the pawn on g5, g4 and knight e5. And what has this achieved for White? Well, a reasonable amount. First of all, the g4 pawn has advanced, so it's somewhat weaker. Secondly, the dark squares around the king side have been weakened. So, for example, the bishop's got a great little square on f4. So Stockfish always played knight bd7, which is a very good move in actual fact, hyper precise, you'd say, straight away challenging the knight on e5. Knight takes g4 is possible. That's one move. We're going to see something similar to that in our main game. It's always a bit of a double-edged thing taking the pawn on g4 because you open up the g file for a black rook, and that can give black an awful lot of counterplay. There's also another move which is knight takes c6.
Looks tempting.
Looks tempting. It's actually kind of been worked out to a draw. So this is in human games then. Bishop e2, takes, castles, queen c6, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop takes g4. And there was a game by a young Russian player called Sarana against Gelfand, where Gelfand played bishop g7 with black and got into trouble. But a subsequent game improved with knight e5. And this turned out to be pretty okay for black. The key idea is that if you play a move like bishop here, black goes knight d3. And this massive knight on d3 basically stops white from doing anything on the e-file. So it looks quite strong. I think Serrano had an internet game later, and he played takes, rook e1, and agreed a draw after queen g4. He's getting his pawn back, but the queens are getting exchanged. So so that line is actually has more or less been worked out to a draw, and it was quite impressive, that Stockfish, obviously worked this out and played this, because this wasn't mainline theory at all at the time. But AlphaZero just plays bishop e2, leaves both the pawns and carries on developing quietly. And now actually bishop b7 would transpose back into our main game position. But Stockfish always played, pretty much always played this move, knight takes e5, simply trying to, make use of the fact that it's got knight d7 in early and get rid of that knight on e5. Bishop takes e5, rook g8, getting out of the pin, castles, bishop b7. And this is a very typical Moscow variation position. I mean, black's still got the extra pawn, still got its weaknesses, still has to work out where to put its king, how to develop. White's got the double pawn center and a lead in development, but it's not really 100% clear, how you're actually going to be getting at the black position. And the lovely thing about the NNs is that they often, they can find these lovely strengthening plans that just make you put your position in order before you finally strike. And AlphaZero does that beautifully. Played g3 in this position. Quite an important move order, actually. I think AlphaZero did play rook e1 once, I think, but then got hit with knight d7, bishop g3, bishop e7, and this pawn on h4 is getting hit. It was quite an interesting game. E5 takes, b3 takes. Queen c7 and knight e4 was played. Castles, check there, takes, and then f6. But it was it was really very unclear game. And these dark squares are all very, very weak. And white's center is really collapsing. So it was a very unclear game, but ended in a draw in the end. What AlphaZero did with g3 is more accurate, because after knight d7, then the pawn on h4 is protected, so the bishop doesn't get tied down to it. And the nice thing about g3 is that it stops black from ever playing g4 to g3 as well. So that sort of counterplay, which often happens, where black plays g3, and if bishop takes, you just sacrifice the rook for the bishop, and then exploit all the weak white dark squares, central dark squares. d4 is very weak if you haven't got a dark squared bishop. So that stops that. a6, black's looking to play c5 at some stage. Rook e1, just protecting the pawn on e4 indirectly, and the bishop on f1, the bishop on e2 can now be redirected, maybe f1 to g2, and just restrict the bishop on b7. h5, queen c2.
With engines, do you know if they were thinking this was about equal, or if each side was liking their own position? Or
I think AlphaZero liked its always liked its position slightly. I think it was around 60% or something, and I think Stockfish thought it was equal. When it was playing these positions. So yeah, I mean it's and to be honest, I think it's kind of fairly balanced. I would say I would think it's easier for white to play than black, because black pieces are a little bit weird, and you're kind of waiting for what white does.
but it is a pawn.
But it is a pawn, and if it goes wrong for white, if white gets it wrong, then
Get it to the end game. Black's doing great.
yeah. I mean, if black manages to get in c5, at a good moment and start rolling those pawns, then it gets very dangerous. I mean, they really are very sharp positions. Knight d7, bishop f4, queen f6 was Stockfish's plan. Played a few different plans in this position. This was its main one. And now a4, just starting to to get this this counterplay going. The idea is if you go queen d4, white will play e5, and then follow up with rook d1 and knight e4. Double pawn sacrifice, but quite dangerous. And on top of that, there's also this idea of queen h7, attacking the rook on g8, and then of course attacking the pawn on h5. So a lot of different things happening all over the board all of a sudden. So Stockfish played rook c8. It was pointed out to me actually that there was a correspondence game that went rook d8 in this position, and looks very, very similar in actual fact to how this AlphaZero-Stockfish game went, but was slightly less successful for white. But Stockfish went rook c8, e5, queen g6, queen d2. And what is white aiming to do here? Very simple. Bishop f1 is coming, probably bishop g2, and well, we can play the knight into e4, maybe to d6. Again, tricky for black to know exactly what to do, but Stockfish took the opportunity to play b4 in this position. And it's not silly at all, because this queen on g6 is stopping the knight from coming to e4 just for this one move. And if we go something like knight d1, then c5 is coming in. We might even have threats like queen e4, followed by queen h1 mate. So all of a sudden, black's counterplay seems to come.
So it's good for black now.
Exactly. But AlphaZero had foreseen this and played this incredible move, bishop takes c4. B takes c3, b takes c3. So it's a piece sacrifice for a pawn. What is white getting for it? Actually, well, first of all, black's queenside has been destroyed, so there's no worries about that anymore. But actually, the main thing that white gets is the open B file. As we shall see, AlphaZero is going to make enormous use of that. And the problem for black is, how are you actually going to get any counterplay? C5 now gets met by D5, which opens up the centre. Very, very dangerous. And otherwise, it's somewhat hard to think, how black is going to get his pieces together. And well, if there are loose pawns here as well, so you might just end up you could easily imagine picking up the a6 pawn and then maybe just pushing the a pawn to queen. I mean, let's have a look at how this proceeded. So a5 was played. It's c5, as mentioned. We played d5, takes, e6. So f takes e6, queen takes d5 is enormously dangerous for black. So knight f6, hoping to maybe get a knight onto e4 at some stage. But this was my engine variation, which I do confess I hadn't seen. C4, first of all, just to stop black from having a firm outpost on there. And then queen b2, and the queen's coming round into b7. This was the variation, bishop c7. And the attack continues. Very, very dangerous. You're just threatening something like bishop d8 and e takes f7 or e7. So really, really dangerous for black. So Stockfish decided to try and sort of wait a little bit with a5, just hold the position. And well, this very simple plan happened. Get the queen passive, and then just pile up on the b file. There we are, tripled rooks on the b file. And white's threat is to play rook b8 at some stage. And, well, you'll notice how hard it is for for black to get the king out of there. The queen's blocking it, the rook's blocking it. Pardon me. So, black went queen h8, hoping to play king f8 to g7. But now we got this stunning move d5 from AlphaZero. To be honest, I mean, you know, these sort of attacking positions, you know, AlphaZero is just phenomenal at them. So what is the problem? Well, if takes, we can go e6, which is not going to be pleasant. And c takes d5 allows rook b8 check, takes, and bishop b5 check. This is the key idea, the reason why you you wanted to have this move d5 included. And if takes, king takes, for example, I've got queen b5, checkmate. So really, really powerful, this. The game actually continued. I'll just show a few more moves. Black went bishop c5, d6, queen e2, just defending that pawn on e5, king f8, rook b7, takes. No, it's a rook sacrifice, but we're getting in. And now this great move, bishop c2, and White's actually aiming just to go queen a6, takes c6, and just, well, completely finish off the black position. So
rook and queen are both kind of fenced in there on the king side, so even though it's black's material up, it just can't get that active, and then it's going to be mate before that happens. Exactly. So I mean, black actually took like this, but after the game continued for a while, but simply with those two bishops and all the black pieces tied up and this very unsafe king, AlphaZero won quite comfortably in the end. So just that's just a kind of an example of how things go when it goes well for White. But I mean, they're very, very complicated positions. But what you do have to watch out for with black is the slow build up and then the undermining of the queen side. And maybe simply taking on e5. Is just a little bit premature there, because it's once the bishop moves from g3, it gives White the opportunity to quickly play the pawn to g3 and get his structure set up. Whereas if you delay taking on e5, as happened in our main game, then White doesn't manage to get in g3 very early. So let's have a look at our main game then, and that was Stoofvlees against AllieStein. After this lengthy digression, bishop e2. Bishop b7, h4, g4, knight e5, and knight bd7. And so here, AllieStein is just waiting. And after castles, AllieStein waits as well, just plays rook g8 in order to see, what is White going to do. Now, I mean, on move 12, instead of castling, knight takes d7. Has been played quite a bit. It was played by Magnus Carlsen and also by his second, Peter Heine Nielsen, against Anton Korobov in the Mr. Dodgy Invitational. Those were blitz games. Again, quite interesting. They were looking for, I guess, something like an AlphaZero type plan. So here this was Magnus against Matlakov, a very fine game. Where White undermines the queen side in a different way. Plays b3, black gets these pawns on b4 and c3, but White undermines it with a3. This is also free. This is also very good. I mean, can recommend looking at that game between Magnus and Matlakov. Was a very, very fine game indeed. Fantastic win from the White side. And Peter Heine Nielsen, Magnus' second, played castles against Anton Korobov, and actually got some very interesting positions. Rook g8, he played b3 as well. Rook d8 takes b4, rook b1, sacking pieces. There were exchanges sacrificed. All sorts of things happened. In general, Peter Heine was doing pretty well, but Korobov was faster. I think that's the general thing. It was a really interesting match, that one. A great pleasure to watch. So knight takes d7 is an alternative, but castles is one of the main lines. Rook g8 again, as said, Allie just waiting here, not taking on e5 early, leaving the bishop on g3 there. And here Stoofvlees takes an interesting decision. It plays knight takes g4. It looks like it might be a bit dangerous opening up this g-file against White's king.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of the main lines. I mean, it does make me very nervous, these sort of things, taking the pawn on g4, because all of a sudden, this rook on g8 gets very, very active. And there's all sorts of possibilities, like, you know, once the knight moves, rook takes g3, sacrificing the exchange, weakening the dark squares. But on the other hand, you know, white does get the pawn back, and white still got, in principle, you know, the advantage of its position, lead in development, and the central pawns here. So, you know, it doesn't look too bad. But black can choose to put more oil onto the fire and play this move. So b4, chasing away the knight from the defense, the center, and knight takes e4. And now we've got the knight on e4 and rook on g8, you know, combining against the bishop on g3. The only drawback is that, well, the black's queenside now is destroyed, so this big queenside majority has been destroyed, and that also means that white's pieces get freedom there. So, you know, this bishop on c4 is now pointing against e6 and f7, and well, this knight is not fantastic on a4, but well, if black tries to break with c5, white's got some way to respond to it as well with knight takes c5. So, you know, basically white's loose, but white's sharp, basically, you know, and well, I think you can say the same for black there. Now, this is all quite well-known theory, actually. So there's been quite a few moves played. Queen a5 is a nice human move. It's been played by Gelfand as well, I think, against Matlikov, although he wasn't too successful with it. Queen e2 is the main move, and now not Gelfand's queen h5, but probably c5 is possible. Had a lot of engine games in this line, and this seemed to turn out quite well, with some quite sharp tactics. Rook d1 castles, d takes c5, rook takes g4. If queen g4 will take that knight on a4. c6, knight takes g3, carnage all over the board, queen g4, knight takes f1, b3, protecting that knight on a4, knight h2, trying to evade all the threats, queen e4 check, king b8 takes, and knight e5. And well, a number of my engine games followed this exact path, and it led to a draw. The key idea being that
guarantee black a draw, can't we?
After takes, we definitely can.
As long as you've got a really good memory.
Bishop d6. Yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. These lines kind of make some sense, I think. But yeah, it's, you know, as always in the semi-Slav, there's quite a bit of learning involved there. But in actual fact, this is the main line of queen a5, probably the main human move. My engines were also quite keen on queen e7, which is fine. It feels a little bit unnatural, but seemed to work out fine. The big move is h5, and this was actually recommended by one of the big human experts on the Semi-Slav and Moscow, Alexei Dreyev, in his book. He recommended this, and to be honest, it's a very natural move. I mean, the knight's covering the attack of the knight on e4, rook on g8, on the bishop on g3. So chase it away and start hacking away at the white king side. Knight e3, and then we play queen f6. Double-edged move, that one. The queen is going to be on the line of the rook when you play knight g3, f takes g3. On the other hand, the queen is allowing black to castle queenside. That looks like the most natural spot now. Defending the pawn on f7 against a move like queen h5. And the queen's also, you know, going to get involved either on the g file or on the dark squares with queen h6. So plenty of stuff happening there. It's also attacking the pawn on d4, which is not insignificant. So queen h5 from white, castles queenside. That's become the main move now. Queen h6 is another possibility. Actually, I think this was the move that was recommended by Dreyev, and it's quite interesting. White's been trying to sacrifice the exchange with queen e2. Knight takes f1, for example. Rook takes f1, and playing this position. I mean, white's got one pawn for the exchange, but yeah, black's position is a little bit loose. Really not clear what you're going to do with that king, because stuff like castles, for example, you can start just chipping away at black's defensive pieces with bishop a6. So I had quite a few engine games in this. Bishop e7, attacking the pawn on h4, d5, takes bishop b5, rook d8, and now this lovely move knight g4. We're coming into e5 in order to attack this knight on d7. And this was pretty much the standard way it was finishing, actually. Takes, knight e5. So something like rook d8, I'll have queen b5 check, which is very unpleasant. But now it's black's turn to counterattack. Rook takes g3. Knight takes d7. Rook takes g2 check. Takes, queen h4. And this was ending up in a draw after knight c5, queen g5 check. King h1, queen h4 check, just a draw by perpetual. Yeah, so lots of sharp lines there, but my engines didn't find very much more than a draw in that line. So castles from black, though, is the main idea. Rook d1, knight takes g3, and queen h6. So
a position where AlphaZero comes up with a novelty.
No, well, not quite. This is Stoofvlees, AllieStein still. And if you're looking at correspondence games, strange enough, there have been some correspondence with the horrifically risky queen f3. It took. I actually did some analysis on my own without an engine for it, and I found some of the lines, but some of the lines I failed to find. It looks incredibly risky because you've got a move like bishop d6, for example, threatening rook takes g3. And, well, it's actually impossible to defend this pawn. But white's got the incredible move, which I did actually find. I was pleased with that one. Bishop a6. And if you go rook takes g3, then queen takes c6 check is going to be mate.
Oh, you know, that kind of position, that's exactly like David Howell got this check, a sudden checkmate against me at King's Place a few years ago.
Oh, right.
Exactly that. Exactly
oh, dear.
That. And he published it in the paper. It was a very nice game by him.
So black can also play bishop takes a6, and then we go queen check. And, well, the key idea here is obviously king b8 doesn't look that fantastic. We can just take that bishop. The key idea actually is that after bishop c7, which you'd kind of like to play maybe, we've got this nice move knight d5. When we're attacking the bishop on c7, this knight's no longer on prise, and of course the pawn is pinned to the queen on h6. So that's extremely painful. Yeah, what can black do? Well, black's got the possibility of going king b8, but then we take. And go rook c1, this was my idea anyway, and knight g4, and then go queen f7, and well, you know, we're attacking d7, also going to get the queens off. If queen d4, knight f2, this is still quite difficult for black because we've got a very unpleasant pin on the d file here, and lots of black pieces on there. So that's actually quite good for white. Oh, I should point out the extra variation: rook takes g3. Queen c6, check, rook f2, which looks dangerous for both sides, but in fact it's only dangerous for one side, because white's threatening either bishop a6 or bishop a8, followed by queen b7. And of course this bishop on d6 is also loose, so there's just too much hanging for black. But what black can do, and this was what really mystified me, black can play this move c5, and if you go d5, then bishop d6 is pretty strong, really, you know, attacking this this pawn on g3. And, well, the engine suggested g4 with the idea of meeting queen h4 with queen h3, which, bizarrely enough, might turn out to be all right for white. But there's stuff, for example, like f5 here, you know, which is really, you know, again, very, very dangerous again. What was my engine line? I think it was bishop a6. Bishop takes, rook takes, queen a8 check, knight b8, queen a7, threatening knight b6 check there, rook d7 check, knight takes, bishop takes f1, knight c5, in we go. There are plenty of engine games like this, but they ended up, you won't be too surprised, in a draw after takes, knight takes. White's got black's the exchange up, but white's got you know, plenty enough play to get a draw there. Knight b7 check is the first threat, so the king has to run g5, and well, black was getting perpetuals in all sorts of ways afterwards. So very, very interesting lines those, but very, very hairy. So Stoofvlees played queen h6, which
Okay. let them guess that.
Oh,
the novelty.
Sorry about that. Queen takes h6 was the
Surprising novelty.
a surprising novelty. Well, it's kind of surprising because of something that crops up here. So bishop h6, because it looked vaguely familiar to me when I saw it, but I couldn't place it immediately. Bishop h6 attacking the knight on e3. The g3 pawn is hanging as well, and well, black's also looking to play c5. So white plays king f2, and well, AllieStein played quite a precise sequence here just to neutralize the game. So knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes, knight takes, rook g2. It's been quite handy playing this move c6 to c5 because this bishop's now very active. King e1, takes, rook f7, and now the final important move is this move bishop d5. Stopping black from taking the pawn on e6, actually activating that bishop, and well, removing the white defense of that pawn on a2. And well, it all looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it until I looked through my notes. It's obviously analysed an awful lot of these Moscow variation games from AlphaZero games, and obviously analysed all the variations also together with AlphaZero. And well, this actually turned out to be the main line of AlphaZero's evaluation of 13 knight takes g4. So this was actually what it thought was best play in this variation, and it gave this position as equal. So
it's funny that Stoofvlees and AllieStein have gone the whole way down this line.
Yeah.
Starting from the TCEC move, which was only one knight f3, and other than that, they're completely on their own.
Exactly. Yeah, it is quite amazing, and funny just to see, that two and a bit years, 2.5 years later, after AlphaZero analysed this, then you get two NNs, also coming to the same conclusion as well. Very, very interesting. And so the game ended takes, rook here, rook there, a3, rook h1 check, and this was a draw. So what can we learn from this? Well, I hope that we can, certainly it might, if you're a semi-Slav player, then I definitely look very carefully at the lines that AllieStein chooses in this variation. I think the neural nets generally have a good sense of variations that are not totally overly horrifically chaotic and complex, sharp, but also vaguely understandable as well. And well, I did think what AllieStein did was very, very sensible here, and in particular this idea, just to combat what AlphaZero did, of not taking this knight on e5 very quickly, but just playing the rest of its moves, I think is a good move order. And what it did in this line with knight takes g4 was just very, very sensible indeed. I do feel in general that these lines with knight takes g4, they're dangerous for black. Black has to loosen himself, playing b4, but generally black's both chipping away at white's centre and also exposing the opponent's king, white's king. So from that point of view, certainly as black, those are the type of positions I love, and always love positions where I've got some chances of creating some danger against the opponent's king, even if my own is a little bit dodgy as well. And certainly, as from the white side, I hope that the AlphaZero's treatment of this, inspires you, and especially this wonderful piece sacrifice that it played, really in this position. Let's have a look at it. Queen d2. This wonderful piece sacrifice, is well worth seeing a few times. And again, it's a whole board compensation. This thing, because it's both restricting the opponent on the queen side. We've got a queen and a rook that can't do anything, and that are also forming some sort of wall to the black king, so they can't escape. And then just a simple plan. You're a piece down, but a very simple plan of just piling up on the b file. And then, the way that AlphaZero just, almost casually just tosses, a whole rook into the equation, and actually also exchanging off probably the worst piece on the board for black, but doing it in order to gain entry squares for its pieces. It's really very beautiful idea there, and yeah, you know, I think well worth remembering if you're a white player as well, and if you're a black player as well, you know, but to avoid it. So there we are. Hope you've enjoyed those games and all that really that wonderful theory on the Semi-Slav. Keep watching because we've got a few more games on the Semi-Slav. Some absolutely incredible games to come still. So you know, and we'll put them all into to a playlist. We'll add them to our Semi-Slav playlist. So if you want to prepare the opening, you can just look through all these wonderful engine games in your opening. And well, just created an awful lot of other playlists recently. So on the English, the Caracan, the French, you know, everything that we've looked at. Queen's Gambit Declined, loads on those as well. So there we are. I mean, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet and you're enjoying it,
please subscribe.
Please subscribe. If you like AlphaZero-Stockfish games, then do have a look at our book Game Changer. It's well worth a read. And otherwise, keep well, keep safe, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching.